Hello and welcome to a new episode of Dropping Your Armour, where we listen to stories from the thinkers, doers, and dreamers on what it means to being human in the modern workplace. My name is Tolga Mahlke. I'm one of the new hosts of this podcast, and today I have the pleasure of having my first episode recorded together with Joachim Stempfle, better known as Joe, as well as Chad Luxenburg, who together founded the company atrain-scitrain. Today in the episode, we explored how they started the company as friends, how their relationship has evolved over the years through different challenges, and they will explore a little bit how their trust was challenged in that and how that disrupted their relationship at times, as well as where they see the organization going, and the most important part, how they have evolved as leaders, because no organization evolves faster than their leaders. And this is a great story to tune into and hearing their examples. Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening from my side. I'm super excited to be here today with Joe and Chad, the two founders of atrain-scitrain. By the way, congratulations. We just had the 20-year anniversary just shortly. Is that, do I remember that correctly?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tolga.
Yeah. It's been a lot of ups and downs in those 20 years, but we're here and we're solid. So that's good.
Yes. A wild ride.
Wild ride. That's right.
And I find it super interesting because those 20 years are only the lifespan of atrain-scitrain, right? But your relationship as friends and the idea of collaborating started way, way earlier, if I remember the stories correctly. Fill the gaps. Tell me a little bit about how the story Joe and Chad started.
1989, right, Chad? I remember because that was the year of German reunification, which I experienced in the US as a high school student. So
yeah. I think it was September 7th, 1989. We were in a concert together, and I actually saw a video, or I saw the TV was on. People were chipping away at the wall, and you were practicing and getting ready for the performance. And I said, Joe, there's people standing on the wall. And you were like, that can't be true. Like, that would never happen. And then I remember it hitting you. And when it hit you, it hit me, because I was just this guy over here in the US who didn't have very much a global view at the time,
Yeah, so I guess we were jumping right in, but it really started, way back. So you can gauge how old we are. But
I didn't want to go down that route.
Yeah. Tolga, thanks for being gentle with us. I guess I was 16 at the time, and then decided to do a high school exchange year in the US, and it happened to be in the place where Chad was also living.
Yeah,
and I think we met pretty much on my first day there, or band practice, right? And I needed someone to help me out. I was set up with these drums that I was supposed to play. I had no idea how to play drums. I'm a guitar player, so I guess Chad helped me out from day one here, and that's how we met, right, Chad?
Yeah, I saw Joe, and it was like in August of 1989, and we were hanging out in a traditional. Like, if you watch any Hollywood movies or anything generated about football and football teams, and, it was a field like that, where we were kind of like preparing for the upcoming season. And I saw Joe, and he was really cool. I thought he was a cool guy. And I, of course, had a car. I played music too. And so we started hanging out almost immediately, didn't we? I mean, honestly.
Exactly. You were my lifesaver at the time. I was new in a country I didn't know. This was the time before the internet. I had no car, no mobility, nothing. So Chad was my link to the country and to everyone else. And we were both musicians at the time. Playing rock music. and I guess that was our initial connecting piece. But
Yeah,
it was from the beginning about playing out together, creating things. We were starting to write songs. We were starting to play out in the US, and it was a bond created from day one, right?
Yeah. Joe, do you remember the car? It was a
I
white
do.
1972 Dodge Dart. And when you drive the car, you could see the street under our feet. Like when it rained, when there was rain, the water literally got us wet up in the car.
Yes, and Chad can be very gentle, so he was always very polite. But finally, it was pretty much already when I was leaving. He's like, one thing I hope you wouldn't do is throw your guitar case in my beautiful car like that every time. You live, you learn, right?
Yeah.
And guys, now let's get right to it. Like two youngsters playing rock music together, getting splashed by rain. Where the heck did the idea of wanting to start a company together form, and when?
It was much later, right? We both, Chad spent some time in Germany, also still as a student, and then we both went, our university routes, jobs. Basically, I didn't start a job. I was more like in the university track, also doing then a little bit of research work, and in parallel, very small, starting, atrain in Germany, more as a side gig at the time, actually, right? Because I wanted to be a psychotherapist. And then when was it? Was it 2006? Then atrain was very small in Germany, but then we met again in the US. Or I came over for vacation, I think.
It was 2001.
Or 2001,
It was right after 9/11. It was right after 9/11 because, and that's when we played that concert one time. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I remember it was a weird time, right? It was like 1 month after 9/11, and certainly
Wow.
a strange time, especially for you to travel over here because the airline industry was way different overnight.
Very true. But it was so much fun. We had a couple of glasses of wine. We were talking about, right, what we were both doing, and then this idea of why don't we really try to make this bigger, right? And look at doing this kind of work. We felt there's a lot of need, for doing more meaningful work with people and creating the right environments. And you were super excited by that idea. And then why don't we do it both in Europe and the US? The problem was we had no money. We had 2 people at the time, or 3 in Germany. It was super small. So, and Chad had a full-time job, right? So how do you get started with those conditions globally, right? That was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I'm hearing you right, you had generally the vision and the passion to impact the world, make something impactful together, and then how did you move it forward?
I mean, maybe I could just share too, like at the same time, I was in operations. And back then in the 90s, whenever you were in operations, there wasn't a formal human resources function, really. It used to be called personnel, where you were hiring and firing. That was the whole, there was no strategy behind it. And usually what they did was they just promoted people who seemed to be good with people. They would look around the business and say, you know what, you would probably be good at this thing called HR. And there was no degrees in that at the time. It was, it just wasn't there. So I then stepped into human resources, and it was really interesting. As I looked around for potential ways of understanding strengths, development areas of people, truly developing them at a deeper level, it was all really old stuff out there, like created in the 1940s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and people were still using that kind of stuff where it was just like looking at things like dominance and introversion and some of that kind of stuff. That stuff has its place for sure. I'm not trying to downgrade it, but I'm just saying that's all I could find, right? And so then when Joe came over, he started talking about some stuff he was researching and working on, and complex problem solving and decision making. He made this dynamic business game to truly tease some of this out, to really allow people to experience this. And then around the same time, I flew to South Carolina. I was looking for something for the business. Like I was very hungry for that. There was this guy named Roy. I'll just leave it at that. I won't say his full name. But he was doing something around assessment. But it was like he had us like read these newspaper articles and then provide each other feedback. And while it seemed a little clunky and it wasn't as good as it could be, I liked the methodology. I thought it was really cool. Then when I started talking to Joe and some of the stuff he was working on, it was like I even started to try to infuse some of this where I was already working at, and try to bring some of this in. And we were already talking about starting a business someday. And in fact, I'm pretty sure in this part of Ohio where I'm sitting right now, we're probably the first emailers, because I used to go up to the university, go into the system and email you, because I still have the hard letters of the things we wrote to each other on, snail mail and letters about the ideas that we had. And then it switched to email. And here we are.
And here we are 20 years later. And Joe, you already indicated just a minute ago that it was the 20 years of the ups and downs, the challenges that one has. One of the challenges, Chad, you just described, is even just the communication at the time was slightly different. What convinced you, Chad, after those snail mails, of quitting your operational job and joining Joe, who had already started a little bit dabbling in this in Germany, to move forward with the company Citrain, atrain in collaboration? What was the winning point for you there?
Well, I mean, just for me, like, I totally trusted what him and I were dreaming about together. I trusted him, still would trust him with anything. And we thought, well, we truly want to make impact and create, there was people getting jobs based on who they know. Some people were just like whoever they were buddies with, getting promotions. And I know I saw a lot of that, practically speaking, in the human resources world. And I just truly believed in what we were doing, and money, none of that stuff mattered. It was like, we just knew we had to do something to impact the world and leave a mark different than what was there now.
Yeah, and I think, at that time it was more intuitive, right? I think we had two things in common. One is a deep interest in people. We both came from backgrounds where we experienced the ups and downs. We saw people in all different strata of society. We both don't come from very, narrow, protected kind of environments, right? So we saw what environments do with people, right? So that was one aspect. And the second one was an entrepreneurial spirit, right? This question of, can it be done differently? Why not? Why not try something else? Experiment with technology was coming at the time, the digital technology, the business game we were coding and stuff like that. We just always had this passion to do something different. And I guess we weren't too afraid of failing. We just said, why not try? It's worth, and we like working with each other. We enjoy that. We have similar values. And we had this spirit of entrepreneurship and experimentation. We were just, it was so clear, right, to both of us that, we have to go for it. We just need to give it a try. And we weren't afraid. If it doesn't work, we'll find something else, right? I had 3 jobs at the time. I was training for psychotherapy, building the company while having still a research job at the university. So I had 3 legs, and it wasn't clear which one would actually fly. And you had your job, right? So this is also when you don't have the funds, sometimes you can't just go all out from the beginning. But that's how it evolved. And then luckily we found our very first customer in the US, right? I still remember we did trips, and Chad took vacation days, and then we both did trips all through the US, and we tried to find our first customer that would allow Chad to quit his job. And we finally found one, right? Where the final call was, you were in the US, I was calling in from Germany. And we made the sale like that, right? We finally got our goal. That allowed us to really take off.
And I got to say, going back to the early years, our work in music together, like trying to create music, record music on very, very shabby equipment that was super cheap. We tried to do special effects like breaking glass. We wanted glass. Now you just hit a button on a keyboard and you got a glass breaking, right? We had actually a microphone down by a trash can, and breaking the glass because we needed that in part of the song, and we actually really experimented back then. And then we realized that there were actually some parallels with what we were doing now and bringing into the world that we were about to enter. But that was interesting time back then, that experimentation. We did the same thing in the business. We experimented, tried things out, and then started to crystallize what would work. And then we started listening to the customer, like what did they really like that we were doing?
Yeah. No, just to add to that, I was reflecting on that recently, that this playful spirit, just trying something out for the right reason, but not with so much a fear of failure, but more, what if, with that idea. I think even our very early customers, when we had some not super developed, mature services, like a buggy simulation that we used and stuff like that, they loved that spirit. Probably I realized later on, probably more than just the content, they loved working with us because of the spirit that we brought to the table. And that was a big asset, right? The enthusiasm, the drive, the passion, the experimentation, the collaboration. That's what we need to always preserve. It's not just what you bring, it's how you bring it, and the mindset and the energy you create.
And I think anyone who sees you guys together, right, sees that deep trust, the playfulness, as you so nicely described, but as well that ultimately there is a friendship there. Chad, you were speaking about trust, which really built you as a strong founding team together. That wasn't, however, always the case in this history, I assume. There were ups and downs where I assume as well trust was something which was at times challenged throughout the history of A-Train. How did you guys deal with this? Because now you're running a company together and you're friends from a long history. And while the vision might have been the same, there must have been times where there were challenges and where the trust was even challenged. How did you guys cope with this? What were those times when the trust was challenged?
First of all, I think there's levels to that. Like on a very deep and fundamental level, I always knew I could trust Chad blindly. And the value of such a relationship cannot be overestimated. Especially in a world where everything changes and everything is very volatile and fast paced. Relationships of real trust where you have each other's back, and you will not be fundamentally betrayed or anything like that. That goes a very long way. So on that level, I don't feel like we ever had, on that level, we never had a challenge. But then, of course, you have disagreements, and we had a lot of disagreements. Sometimes there was a competitiveness coming in, at certain periods. You know what I mean? Some of our team members made fun of us about that piece coming in. There were elements of rivalry at certain periods in our lives, which jeopardized what we were trying to build, and also at times there was an element of just drifting apart. You just don't talk enough and you go different directions, and then it's hard to bring together. And of course some strategic disagreements, and that had to be sorted out, right? This what's the friendship, and where do you really fundamentally disagree on something that needs to be sorted out. Just because you're friends, you can't just let that sit. It has to be sorted out. So I think we had some pretty tough conversations as well, right? Not all of them were happy, in that sense, especially when we had some of those more fundamental disagreements. One of them, which is a very, very interesting one, was about how much do we go separate, Europe, US as separate entities? How much do we truly collaborate? That was one of the areas where we had some pretty intense discussions and where things changed, right, Chad, over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Joey. I mean, I think at any moment he knew that I would fly to wherever he is, and I knew he would fly to wherever I am, and we would help each other, even if we were in the middle of a heavy discussion or some intense, fellowship. We always knew at a base level that we would do that. I think that, the competitiveness kind of creeped in. And I think the reason there's a million and one leadership books is there's more than 1,000,001 ways to do it. And you actually could really let that creep in, you know. And for example, in the time period Joe was talking about, experiential learning, you know, is something that we thought was a bit on the rise in North America, while transformation work was really peaking and starting to really move in Europe. And I think somehow we let some of those things kind of hit between us a little bit. But what I found between Joe and I, like whenever we truly talk to one another and do the old Brene Brown, the story I'm telling myself is this. We weren't usually correct. You know, the story that we were telling ourselves wasn't actually correct about the way the other was thinking. And I think whenever we communicate, it really helped to chisel through some of that. And I have to say, our teams have been extremely helpful too. Like I remember we were at a global meeting, and I don't want to say her name because I didn't ask permission to, but I remember one of our very awesome professionals stood up in front of the whole group, put Joe and I in the center of the room and said, we can't move forward with our strategy until we make sure you two are talking good and okay. And it actually worked. You know what I mean? Like, Joe looked at me and said, shit, I think we have to talk. Here, I thought we were hiding the way we had a bit of an argument going on, and I thought we were hiding it. No, we weren't hiding it. You know, everybody could see that we were a little bit at odds at the time.
Yes.
So the team stepping in and being part of just a level of care like I've never seen.
Exactly.
Was amazing. You know.
Exactly. And I think there is one very important aspect when you have a friendship and a relationship on the business side over such a long period of time. You need to acknowledge that everything changes. You change, you know, both of us, we changed, right? The business changes, reality changes, everything changes. So, you know, any solid relationship like this needs to be rediscussed and re-evaluated continuously, right? Otherwise, it becomes constraining. And that's what happened also with our discussions, right? That the relationship, while we had this deep trust, the relationship transformed multiple times because we transformed, right? For example, I think in the early days, you know, it was very much a small team setup and everyone was just doing whatever they want. Then there was a bit of that hierarchical piece creeping in, you know what I mean? And then we had to go away from that, go back to, you know, it's actually just a team of teams set up. Now it's just a larger organization with more teams, you know, enlarge that. It's not about the two of us, you know, we need to let other people in. It needs to become a broader, you know, leadership community, that kind of stuff. You know, all of that challenges you, you know. For example, it challenged me very much on this, you know, everyone likes to have a degree of control. You know what I mean? This letting go piece is not always easy. You know what I mean? And so it means you need to change, and it means the relationship needs to change, right? I remember we had a tough discussion at one point. I'll share it here, Chad. You can comment on it, right? It was about, look, this is not anymore about the Joe and Chad show. You know, it's much bigger than that, and we both need to come to grips with, you know, this is about us letting go and enlarging and inviting people in. I mean, you're one of them, Tolga, right? Then you need to really share leadership and all of that. And it's a mindset change that you need to go through. And it's in some ways a loss of control, you know, and all of that. And there is fears connected to that. And so, you know, this is the interesting part, right? That there's a personal transformation that needs to happen as an organization grows. There is then a relationship that needs to be rediscussed and opened also to others, right? That it's not so much only ours. I mean, we have a very special one, but you need to open that up. You know what I mean? So that was some of the, yeah.
But I appreciate that we have on tape right now Joe admitting that he had to let go. Like he was the, you know, he had to change his mindset, you know, and just realize I was correct. And, you know, that's okay, Joe. It's okay to really, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where the self-awareness bit comes in.
Obviously, I'm joking. I think you're right. We had to really, you know, we changed over time. We had to shift. I personally had to shift my mindset. But we do a lot of deep work, which is very new in the world because a lot of people don't go there. And I think even the deep work that we do helped me, because some of the things we mentioned early on, that we, you know, we all have different realities that we came from in our families and challenging situations, right? Some of that can creep in. And then sort of the story you're telling yourself is based off an old message of what you've seen happen before. And, and we could pin that on one another sometimes, and it can shape the decisions we make and stuff like that. And I think we've been good at challenging one another and trying to pierce through some of that,
So typically, when we analyze conflicts, right, we've got two levels. We've got the context, which can be challenging, and then the relationship side. On top of that, one, you've got that additional element that you've got this really old, deep friendship. So the relationship side with you two goes even further. Did you find that at times could be a challenge and hindering you guys in having those open, frank conversations around the content side of the conflict? Or was that actually beneficial to resolving some of those challenges? How did you go about that?
For me, it was initially a challenge because when you have such a deep friendship, you don't want to hurt someone else's feelings. Especially, I wouldn't want to hurt Chad's feelings. So at times, when you have an area of disagreement or even just the feedback that you feel, you would need to give, it could be difficult to even go there. I mean, it's easier to only go to a certain point, but then I realized then you don't get to a real, if you don't speak your full truth and Chad doesn't speak his full truth, then you get to a superficial level of agreement, but it doesn't hold. And we had some of that, right? We had some of those agreements that then didn't quite hold because both of us were not fully truthful with everything that we think, right? And it's not because we didn't want to be truthful. It was more because probably we both didn't want to hurt each other's feelings. I mean, there is that element then that holds you back. So I think a big part, at least for me, was to trust in a relationship that it can handle even some of those very difficult conversations, right? We had one, for example, not too long ago when we were both doing a vacation in France, and we had a walk, and it was not always an easy conversation. We had a beautiful walk on the beach, and it was a long conversation, right? And we talked about some difficult topics. And and then we were both afterwards like, was this a good or a bad conversation? It wasn't a fun conversation, right? But I think it was an important one, that ultimately led to a more fundamental alignment. For example, on important topics such as, how do we want to deal with hierarchy versus self-organization, things like that. To what degree do we see collaboration as true collaboration? And those were the kind of things we had to discuss.
And it's so interesting to listen to you guys, right? Because you said early on in the beginning, it was really that playful part, right? That fearlessness which you had approaching new customers. And you both said we've got that deep, deep trust in our relationship. But through the journey, that trust was challenged by, are we going deep enough? And what helped you guys really then go to that depth?
I think, over time, you change, right, as a person. And I changed personally more from initially it was probably, there was an intuitive care for people and an empathy, but there was a lot of that playfulness and experimentation. And that was, my primary driver at the time. And as you grow and you realize the responsibility you have and the impact you have, as an organization, you change. At least for me, it made a difference, that you are more challenged to become more self-aware of how you're actually acting, and when are you running on autopilot, right? The deep work that Chad was saying, it became more and more relevant that, the level of responsibility, how important it is that the decisions, we make and then the conversations we have or the things we don't do, that this is actually based on conscious decision as opposed to it's just your autopilot. You know what I mean? And then I think there was a change there. And Chad, I think you probably went through a similar. We were able to, have that journey together. From a running on autopilot, let's do this thing. It's it feels great. It's fun, and we care about people, to a more mindful, conscious, deliberate kind of approach to it without losing the other part, right? That was important. We still have, right? We can still play out and have fun, and that's important. But there is a different level of depth now to the discussion and to the reflection.
Yeah, I agree. It's better now than it's been, and I think we're on a great trajectory forward. I remember, like, several months back, I was leading a workshop, and it was a group of senior leaders. We were working on their work within that company. Let's just say that, and it reminds me of. I was talking to them and having them reflect on how they need to come together and what they're doing for the world, and I literally felt myself coming under. Like I was talking to myself, like, you know what I mean? Those who can't do, teach, kind of thing. I actually literally am not doing what I'm actually asking them to do, And I think there's an old saying back down south where they said a pastor can preach themselves under conviction, kind of thing, And I feel like I was doing that in that moment, but it was based on a long journey that I was already on. And so anyway, I feel like we're aligned. We're aligned, and we've had a strong alignment all throughout the years, but we've veered from time to time. But I think right now it's very solid.
And what I think is always amazing when I see you two together is that when you speak about the vision of where you want to go, there is always that clarity and that alignment. It sounds on the journey at times there was that difference in how do we get there, which challenged your friendship. I have clarity on the vision, but how about you guys share in a few sentences what's next for atrain? Where do you want to see atrain grow into in the future, and how do you want to grow your friendship?
Well, I mean, I love this missions that we came up with. We create conditions for people to break through. And that's what I think sometimes in a assessment development industry that can be quite commoditized. You have to have that special impact. Like, I don't want to just do something to do it. I want every life that we come involved with, every company that we come in contact with, everybody in society, that when they feel what we do, they're changed from it, or they have the chance to be changed from it. And then everything we design through the Solutions Hub, that we always have that lens, like, is this truly going to allow for change to occur, for people to break through, And I think globally, as our industry grows, leadership development, I think it's the $366 billion just in the leadership space. And that's not even including the transformation work that we're doing. So it's quite a lot. And we've been told time and time again that we're truly the best at what we do when it comes to assessing talent and teams, helping in society, helping individuals, helping leaders. And I want to keep coming together globally, growing each region. We're doing great work in multiple continents now, naturally, and I want to keep that going. As far as like the friendship goes, Joe is, he's my best friend. We've been lifelong friends. We challenge each other. I expect direct feedback from him. By the way, that was quite interesting, him coming from Central Europe and me coming from North America. Some of the ways he would talk to me, I was like, what did you just say to me?
Yeah, super elegant.
Did you just tell me? Did you just say that out loud? And so there was this together of like,
I can't see that was Joe.
Yeah.
Giving one another feedback.
And the other way around, Chad giving me feedback, and I didn't realize I was just receiving feedback.
So anyway, I know that's a long answer to answer your question, but for the business, that's what I want. And for our relationship, I want it to keep evolving, and keep meeting in France, in Normandy,
Yeah, and I think, I'll start with the relationship side, right? A very cool thing is that actually my 13-year-old will in just 10 days from now, maybe less, he will actually fly over to the US for a couple of weeks with Chad, right? Because Chad has such a intuitive, warm and positive influence. My kids all love Chad, right? So my 13-year-old is like, he asked, he wants to go to the US alone, to be with Chad, and I can imagine anyone else where he would be comfortable to go to a different continent at that age, you know what I mean? But it's just so the relationship, I think it's going to just evolve, and it shows, it spreads to, right, to families and to others, and that's, I don't have any concern that this will change. Now on the purpose and what we try to do with the organization, I think this piece of creating the conditions for people to break through, it's more relevant than ever. And I think what would you do? There should always be a values component to it. We live in a world now where everything changes at a much faster pace, and technology on top will change even more now with AI and ChatGPT and all. The influence that this will have on jobs is massive. And I was always very intrigued by work, for example, people like Amartya Sen, who wrote a book which is called Development as Freedom, right? And he talks about when people develop capabilities, they can participate more in society. The freedom to choose, the freedom to act depends on the capabilities you have, right? If you don't have capabilities, you're limited. Your range is limited. So I think it's an ethical obligation to ensure that we provide capabilities to people so that they can live full lives and participate fully in society. And then the next step of that is, it's great when you have developed your capabilities, but then with freedom comes responsibility, right? This is where leadership comes in. So are you there just to optimize yourself, or what's your impact? If you have capabilities, are you also actually leveraging those capabilities to provide environments for others? This is where the work with leaders comes into play. And then there is the level of systems, right? Are systems designed in a way that people can understand themselves, can gain awareness of their actions and their impact, can grow themselves, right? This is the creating the conditions piece. And I just think there is so much need for that. And more recently, we're also looking at working in other sectors rather than just industry, right? You look at, for example, is there ways to teach kids earlier about a little bit more about themselves? I was very intrigued with a book by a researcher in education who said, in school you learn everything about the outside world and nothing about your inside world. Is that the status that we want to preserve, or does that need to change? And if so, how? And Chad, you've been helping, right, to select principals for schools based on evidence that if principals are stronger in leadership capabilities, kids develop differently in these schools. So I think there is a lot ahead of us, both in terms of our core business, but also in terms of how do we possibly expand some of the knowledge we have about individuals, individual growth, and then systems to other sectors. How do we make that available in a way?
And since we're running out of time slightly, I would have another question for you guys. If you were going to go back, Joe and Chat, and give yourselves some advice, when you started the company as friends and now was having gone through this journey together, what would that advice be to yourself, Joe?
It's very simple. Don't take yourself so damn seriously.
All right.
A lot of the stuff that you think is so important and you're so emotional about, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter.
Come back to that core value of what is our friendship, right? And Chad, I think you said it so nicely. We would both jump on a plane and we would have each other's back no matter what, right? And therefore we can be truly authentic as well when we provide feedback, maybe in a more charming way, like Chad, you do it, in a more direct forward way that Joe, you might do it. Chad, what would you advise yourself?
It's interesting. I had somebody on our team just yesterday say, I noticed something like that was just from her outside perspective. When you have outside forces influence you, or something influences Joe, and it fits more with the way your storyline or the way you see things going, you tend to separate a little more. and I can't speak for you, Joe, but for me, I have found that like when I have somebody join us or like part of the company or like, and they seem to really anchor into the space that I'm thinking we need to go, it kind of fueled me a bit in that direction to kind of show that maybe I was right on something, you know? And what I would tell myself is don't do that. You know what I mean? It's okay to have the data. It's okay to have the information, but more grab it and then come together and discuss it. And I think that's what I would challenge us both to do in the future, because every single time we've had our team put us in the center of the room and talk about the big picture, why, the vision, why we do what we do, they always say the same thing. You guys are completely aligned. Like, what is the issue? There's never an issue, right? So it's usually around the how. And so I think that's the advice I would give myself. The minute you feel this going on, which, by the way, looking back, I would feel it. Going forward, I'm going to feel it. You immediately call it out with Joe, and Joe does the same with me, and say, I'm feeling uncomfortable because of X, Y, and Z, and then we align. Because every time we align, the power is immense, and we're completely aligned.
And one last question for both of you. I believe this is part of the podcast series, and since I'm a new host, I actually have to read it off. But Chad, this time I'll start with you, and I would like you to complete the sentence for me. When I drop my armor,
Usually I cry. I don't know why. I think it's been such an armor is something I've built over a very tough life at times. I had to deal with a lot of challenges growing up and obviously getting into adulthood. And so I kind of I say that jokingly, but seriously, it causes me to really hit at that level. And whenever I have a tear in my eye, I actually know there's a breakthrough about to happen. And so that's when I truly reflect. I don't know if that answers your question. But
that is, yeah, it's beautiful. It allows you to, it sounds to me what you're describing is it's allowing you to really tune into yourself and to your emotions and your senses versus protecting yourself from the outside world for whatever reason, right?
It's embarrassing. When I was a kid, I refused to watch ET because I heard that in ET you would cry, you know, and I just was so against that, you know. It's just something I always fought against. And it's so funny that sometimes I can now see that as a trigger to, oh, something deeper is going on.
It's interesting how this strongman image still influences us so much, hey? Yeah. Joe, same question to you. When you drop your armor, you, or in this case, I.
So first of all, thanks to Chad for answering first, because I needed to think. So you gave me a little bit of time. And for me, it's really about speaking and listening from the heart as opposed to from the brain. You know, those are the moments when your ego stops trying to control and your brain then stops to direct everything. And you, at least for me, then it's more like speaking from the heart and taking things in from the heart, and then I see things differently, and I might be more truthful about things in those circumstances, and that's very important to get there regularly.
Tolga, too, maybe can we tell one funny story about the other person real quick? I just have
Absolutely.
I have a funny story. So when I knew that Joe was truly agile from an early age, I found, you know, that he could shift and be more flexible when needed to be. We had heard that these, back when we were in high school, we heard that these cute girls were having a party at their swimming pool at their home. And so we were in that Dodge Dart, and it wasn't raining that day. It was actually a beautiful day. And so we had the windows down because there was no air conditioning, right? And this was in 1989. And we had the song Any Way You Want It by Journey was on the stereo. And Joe was like, turn that up. And I was like, yes, I will, you know. And so it was we were rocking on the way down the street to get to this house. And I think if I'm not mistaken, Joe, you thought a few of the girls were kind of cute in there too. And so we went up in there with, "Hey, ladies, we're here for the swimming party," right? And it started to go well. Just then the mother comes running up from the barn and says, "We need you, Joe, Chad, we need you in the barn right now because a calf's being born, and we need you to help deliver this calf." I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
So we run down in the barn, and we are just covered with mud from head to toe, trying to help in this situation. And so that's when I knew Joe had some agility within him. He could shift in a moment, like from the pool, everything's good. There was good music playing, to being completely muddy, getting back in the car as muddy mess and heading back home.
In all honesty, you did the delivery. I was standing there like a deer caught in the headlights. We were covered in blood, and the sad thing is the calf did die at the end of the day.
Oh, no.
But it wasn't, I guess, completely our fault, only partially. But anyways.
I was going to leave that part out, but yeah, poor calf didn't make it.
Yes, didn't make it, no.
Did it impress the ladies?
We were just, I don't know. We just tried to get out of there.
not really. That part was done. This was a different mode.
Anything else you guys would like to share with each other or the audience based on the conversation today?
Well, one thing I think is amazing is that we are coming from very different environments, cultures, backgrounds, and all that. But we were able to have a friendship, even when the time when the internet wasn't there, that held for such a long time. And it even enabled us to create, these beautiful things. And I sometimes have this chat with a lady who runs the exchange organization that brought me over at the time, just thanking her for what they did for us. And she's always very grateful also of, responding back. We make donations to them as well. But I think, the piece that sometimes now in this world, you hear a lot about what we're different and where we are different. And in reality is there is so much more that humans everywhere have in common. And this spirit of, you can come together with anybody, anywhere, regardless of, location, geography, background, religion, none of that stuff really matters when it comes to connecting truly as human beings. I hope that, maybe our story can help others, to do the same. And then, if you feel like there's something you could do together and you're not quite sure if it's going to work, just try it. Go for it.
And I think for me, one of the key things I'm taking away from the conversation today, Joe and Chad, is that it is going back, no matter how difficult times might be, is, peeling back those different layers of the conflict or the onion to really going back to what are our core values and what, in this case, Joe, I'll tag onto that. What are the common denominators, and then building up from those again. That, however, requires, if I heard you correctly, true courageous authenticity, which allows us to really peel back those layers. Otherwise, we won't get there. So I thank you both for sharing your story, and I'm looking forward to meeting you guys tomorrow anyhow, because I'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful afternoon, morning, Chad, and I'm going to go and have my well-deserved beer now.
Thank you, Tolga. You're an amazing host.
Yeah, thanks, Tolga.
Thank you.